Today? Well, today we need to have a slightly uncomfortable conversation.
Uncomfortable is one word for it. I might say disorienting.
Yeah, disorienting works because we need to talk about a phrase that we all hear constantly. You turn on the news, you're scrolling online, and you see a city struggling.
hmm
Maybe it's high poverty rates, could be overcrowding in the jails, or just, a general sense that things aren't moving forward for the people who live there. And what's the immediate reaction? What do we always say?
The system is broken.
Exactly. The
Yeah.
system is failing or the system is malfunctioning. We treat it like a car engine that's sputtering, right?
Right.
Like if we just changed the spark plugs or got a better mechanic, a new mayor or a new policy, it would just run smooth.
Yeah, it's our default setting. We assume it's incompetence or a lack of funding or just bureaucratic messiness. We assume the machine is trying to work, but it just can't.
But I've got a stack of documents in front of me today, articles, some really sharp structural analysis, and a few flowcharts that, frankly, look a bit like a nightmare all focused on Atlanta.
Okay.
And they're proposing a startling idea, a really disturbing question, actually.
Which is,
What if this system isn't broken at all?
which implies,
Which implies that the poverty, the jail overcrowding, the stalled economic mobility, specifically for the Black community in Atlanta, isn't a bug.
it's a feature.
It's a feature. The sources we are diving into today argue that this isn't a broken machine. It is a perfectly functioning rat trap.
That is a provocative thesis, to say the least. And, just to set the stage here, we aren't talking about conspiracy theories in the usual sense.
No.
The sources we're looking at are analyzing the mechanics of a city, and if you're going to use a metaphor like a rat trap, you have to understand how a trap actually works. It's not just a cage.
Right. A cage just holds you. A trap.
Yeah.
A trap has to lure you in first.
Exactly. You cannot catch a mouse without cheese. And in this analogy, the cheese, the lure that pulls people in, is the brand of Atlanta itself.
The Black Mecca.
The Atlantis of the South. The Wakanda of the real world, you hear that one a lot.
And let's be fair, that isn't just marketing fluff. That image exists for a reason. I mean, if you are a Black professional or creative anywhere in America and you look at Atlanta, what do you see?
You see Black mayors, Black judges.
CEOs, massive cultural icons, rap stars living in mansions. It looks like the promised land.
It does. It signals safety. It signals opportunity. And the source material argues that this visibility is essential to the trap. It creates this illusion that Atlanta is a place where Black gold, and by gold, the sources mean actual durable wealth and ownership, is protected.
Okay, so the brand lures people in. But the sources make a weird distinction here between gold and true value. Help me unpack that, because usually those mean the same thing.
It's a critical distinction in this theory. Gold is the capital money, property, equity. But true value in the context of these documents is the people.
Oh, okay. It's their labor, their culture, their creativity, the cool factor, the energy that actually makes a city run.
So the argument is that the Black Mecca brand lures that human energy, that true value, into the city core.
Correct.
Yeah.
But here's the twist, and this is where we get into the trap part of the metaphor.
Yeah.
The argument is that the traps snaps shut the moment those people try to move from being consumers of the city.
To being owners of it.
Exactly.
So as long as you're just visiting or renting an apartment, buying clothes at the mall, or partying in the clubs,
Yeah,
you're fine. You're enjoying the cheese.
you are safe. You are a customer. But the moment you try to own the block, the moment you try to build something that generates independent wealth,
That's when the spring triggers.
that's it.
This sounds so mechanical.
It is described as mechanical. The sources call the mechanism that stops this ownership the proxy guard. Proxy guard. Okay, let's hold on that term for a second. Because usually when people talk about systemic racism or oppression, they talk about, old white men in smoke-filled rooms. But proxy implies something else.
It implies a substitute, and this is the part of the deep dive that explains why the Mecca illusion holds up so well. The reason the community often doesn't realize they are in a trap is because of who is manning the gate.
Because the people running the city look just like them.
Precisely. The text explicitly says the hands pulling the rug look just like their own. It references Black city officials, Black prosecutors, Black police chiefs. The theory is that the system uses these leaders as hired men, as proxies.
So it's a form of camouflage.
It's more like disorientation. One of the sources uses this phrase, legislative and judicial kidnapping. It describes a cycle where the community is kept in this state of perpetual confusion because they don't know who they are fighting.
Right.
If the face of the system looks like your cousin or your uncle or the hero you grew up watching, you just don't expect them to be the one tripping you up.
Okay, that's a heavy theoretical framework. Administrative evil, proxy guards, rat traps. I need to see this on the ground. Does the source give us concrete examples of this spring snapping shut?
They do. They give us two very different case studies that show this mechanism working at the bottom of the economic ladder and then at the very top.
Okay, let's start at the bottom.
The vendor crackdown.
So we're talking about the folks selling water and T-shirts on the street corners. The water boys.
Right. Now think about the lure we talked about. The city tells people, be entrepreneurs, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. They promote this low barrier entrepreneurship. It's the classic American dream pitch.
And for a lot of young men in Atlanta, that was the path. They weren't asking for handouts. They were out there in the heat selling a product.
Exactly. They were taking initiative. And the sources discuss how these vendors became successful, organized, and independent. They were building a real microeconomy.
And according to the rat trap theory, that independence, that's the trigger.
Yes, because they were becoming owners of that space. The sources detail how the city, acting as the proxy, stepped in to pull the rug. And this wasn't just a simple move along.
No.
It was a whole legislative maneuver.
I'm looking at the notes here. It says the vendors actually went to court and won.
They did. They fought for their right to vend. But the city allegedly ignored those court orders or just found ways around them. They legislated these independent business owners into a lottery system.
A lottery system.
Yes. So instead of having a right to your business, you had to hope your number was called to get a designated spot.
Wait, so they effectively nullified the rights they had just won in court.
That's the argument. The lottery system turned them from owners into what the text calls ambassadors.
Ambassadors, that sounds nice, but it's actually a demotion, isn't it?
It creates dependency. An owner has agency. An ambassador serves at the pleasure of the state. You go from running your own shop to essentially being, a mascot for the city's tourism board.
And who was enforcing this? Who was blocking the sidewalk?
The hired men.
Black city officials.
Right. So that's the mechanism at the street level. But you might say, okay, that's just street vending. It's chaotic. What about the big time?
Which brings us to the second case study, the YSL Mauricio trial.
Young stoner life, young thug.
This is massive. I mean, we're talking about global superstars. This fits the Mecca narrative perfectly. Come to Atlanta, become a rap god.
That was the lure, the black music capital. And YSL wasn't just a rap group. The sources describe them as a decentralized economic engine.
Right. They were employing people. They were moving money, building influence. It bypassed the traditional corporate gatekeepers.
Correct. They were creating value. But again, the argument is that once that engine became too autonomous, once it started functioning like its own ecosystem, the state triggered the trap. They used RICO laws.
Can we just pause on RICO for a second? Because I think most people hear RICO and they think of the mafia, the godfather.
That's right.
It stands for racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations. It was designed for mob bosses.
Exactly. It was designed to take down criminal enterprises where the boss doesn't get his hands dirty. But here, the argument is that the state used RCO to turn their true value, their culture, their lyrics, their art, into criminal evidence.
We've seen that in the news.
Yeah.
Using song lyrics as confessions in court.
It's a profound shift. The source argues this weaponizes the culture against the creators. And again, look at the hired man. The sources point out that it was black prosecutors weaponizing these statutes.
The comparison the text makes here is really sticking with me. It says in the vendor case, owners are turned into ambassadors.
Right.
But in the YSL case, creators are turned into compliance tenants.
Compliance tenant.
That is a devastating phrase.
It really is. Think about what a tenant is. You don't own the building. You just rent space. And if you violate the lease, if you stop complying, you get evicted.
So even if you are a multimillionaire rapper, if you are a compliance tenant, you are only allowed to succeed as long as you play by the specific rules set by the landlord.
And the landlord is the system. It implies that your success is not a right. It's a temporary permission slip.
So why? I mean, really, why? Why would a city sabotage its own success stories? Why not just let people build wealth?
The source calls this administrative evil. The goal, they argue, is not to destroy the people, but to prevent the accumulation of generational wealth that is independent of the system.
So they want the culture.
They want the culture, they want the tax revenue, they want the cool, but they don't want the power that comes with actual ownership.
Every time a Black Wall Street starts to form, whether it's on a sidewalk or in a recording studio, the proxy guard is triggered to clean it up.
Or criminalize it.
Okay, so that is the philosophical side of the rat trap, so lure and the rug pull. But we need to pivot because the sources don't just talk about laws and lawsuits. They talk about a physical machine, a brick-and-mortar box that enforces all of this.
The Fulton County Jail.
The FCJ.
This is where we move from the abstract to the very, very concrete. We have a flowchart here in the notes. Let's call it the cycle of capture, and it places the Fulton County Jail right in the center of the city's mechanics.
I'm looking at this diagram now. It's a loop. On the left, you start with poor neighborhoods.
Right. Low income, lack of resources. The arrow points from there to heavy policing.
Which leads to the capture point, arrest. And then the jail. Now, usually when we think of jail, we think of it as a holding pen, a timeout box. You go there, you serve your time, you leave.
But the source describes it differently. It calls the jail a socioeconomic feedback loop.
A feedback loop means the output feeds back into the input. It makes itself stronger. How does a jail do that?
The key mechanism, according to these documents, is pretrial detention. This is where the trap tightens. We need to really understand what pretrial detention does to a person.
This is when you haven't been convicted yet, right? You're just waiting for your day in court.
Exactly. You are legally innocent. But if you can't afford bail, you sit there. Sometimes for weeks, months. In Fulton County's case, sometimes years.
Wow.
Now imagine you are a vendor or a young guy working a warehouse job. You get arrested. You sit in jail for 3 weeks waiting for a hearing. What happens to your job?
You lose it. You're a no-call, no-show.
Gone. What happens to your rent?
You miss the payment. You get evicted.
What about your car note?
Repossessed.
This is the economic strain arrow in the diagram. The jail isn't just holding you, it is actively stripping your assets. It is creating financial chaos for you and your family, and that leads directly to the next box, return to poverty.
So you come out poorer than when you went in.
Much poorer and desperate. And desperation leads to
recidivism. You do what you have to do to survive, and you end up right back in the jail.
It creates a perfect circle. The jail ensures the conditions for its own necessity. The source calls this the node concept. The jail isn't a drain on the city. In a twisted way, it's an engine.
An engine.
Yeah, it extracts value through fines, fees, court costs, phone calls. It's draining the very community it claims to be correcting.
There's a line in the text that really sums this up for me. It is impossible to climb a ladder when the person holding it is also the one pulling the rug. When you look at this jail cycle, that isn't just a metaphor. That's the ladder being yanked away every time someone tries to step up.
It's community suppression. The source explicitly mentions that by incarcerating large numbers of men from specific neighborhoods, you reduce the local labor pool, you reduce property wealth, you ensure those neighborhoods stay dependent on the state for survival.
But here's where it gets really interesting and honestly kind of tragic. I want to talk about the economics of who runs this trap, because the sources call it a self-funding trap.
This is the concept of administrative ransom. The idea is that the city takes the revenue generated by the people, the gold, whether that's through the culture attracting tourists or the fines extracted from the tour,
and uses it to fund the very system that traps them.
Exactly. It pays for itself. It pays for the ambassadors. It pays for the prosecutors.
But there's an even deeper irony here regarding the jobs. The text calls it the hired guard paradox. And this part actually stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah, this is a tough realization. The source asks the question, who works in the jail? Who are the guards? Who are the detention officers?
And the answer is,
the workforce inside the jail often comes from the very same impoverished communities that are being incarcerated.
Wait, so the solution to poverty offered by the system is a job guarding your own neighbors?
Precisely. Think about the efficiency of that. The system offers a pittance, that's the word the text uses, a small salary benefits back to the community, but only if they agree to act as security for the trap.
It's a closed loop. The community provides the prisoners, and the community provides the guards.
And the global institutions, the ones actually holding the gold, they don't have to get their hands dirty. They don't have to staff the facility. They just watch the machine run.
That is incredibly efficient. Evil, but mechanically efficient.
And it goes back to that disorientation. If the person locking your cell door grew up on your block, It's much harder to see the systemic nature of the problem. You don't know who to feed. It feels personal, not structural.
So let's zoom out. If this rat trap is working as intended, if the lure brings people in, the proxy guard keeps them from owning anything, and the jail cycles them through poverty, what is the actual result for Atlanta? What does the scoreboard look like?
Upward mobility. That's the ultimate metric.
And how does Atlanta rank?
The source claims Atlanta has the lowest upward mobility in the country. If you are born poor in Atlanta, you are more likely to stay poor there than almost anywhere else in the U.S.
Which just flies in the face of the Mecca branding.
Completely. But it connects directly to this rat trap theory.
Because of the latter.
Right. If you have a system that is mechanically designed like a trap-to snapshot when someone gains independence, upward mobility is mechanically impossible. It's not an accident. The stalling of mobility isn't a failure of the machine, it is the function of the machine.
It really forces you to rethink the definition of the true value of the city. The source says the true value is the people who believe in the Mecca.
Yes, their belief, their hope, their talent, that is the engine. The city needs that energy to run. It needs the culture to sell the brand.
But the gold.
The gold, the real equity, the land, the capital, is guarded by those holding the rug.
It's a distinction between the bait and the trapper.
Correct. The Mecca is the bait. And it's delicious bait. It's beautiful, but you have to ask yourself why it's there.
I think the most shocking part of reading through these sources is just how intentional it all sounds.
Yeah.
We are so used to forgiving systems for being clumsy. We say, oh, they meant well, but the execution was bad.
Right.
But describing it as mechanical evil really changes how you look at a skyline or a court case.
It forces you to shift your perspective. It forces you to stop asking, how do we fix this broken system, and start asking, who is benefiting from this working exactly as it is?
That's the scary question.
The efficiency is the frightening part. The way the jail fees feed the court, the way the poverty feeds the jail, the way the culture feeds the brand that lures more people in. It is a perpetual motion machine.
And the folks caught in it, whether they were selling water on the corner for a few bucks or selling out State Farm Arena, are dealing with the same mechanism.
That's the aha moment the source wants us to have. The vendor and the rap star are in the same trap. One is just higher up on the cheese pile than the other. But the spring works the same way.
Compliance tenets. That phrase is going to stick with me for a long time.
It should. It redefines success in this context, not as ownership, but as temporary permission. A lease that can be canceled.
Well, this has certainly been a heavy lift today. It's not the happiest deep dive we've ever done, but it feels like a necessary one. It's rare we get to see such a cohesive, if disturbing, theory of how a city operates.
It definitely changes the lens through which you view the news coming out of Atlanta. Next time you see a headline about a RICO trial or a jail crisis, you might see the gears turning behind it.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listener with a final thought. Something to chew on that comes from the spirit of these sources. We've talked about the true value being the people and the gold being the wealth extracted. We've talked about the lure and the trap. The question I'm left with is this. If the Mecca is the bait and the local officials are just the hired guards, who exactly is the trapper?
That is the ultimate question. Who owns the rug?
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.